I am honored to speak here today in the country of my birth, a country that has been the cradle of human civilization for millennia, on a topic that will determine the future of human civilization and whether it lasts for more millennia. I'm an economist who's worked on development and environment issues for several decades, and I wanted to speak to you today about the economy of the future. But before doing that, let me start with a story from the past. Over 3,000 years ago, a different kind of climate change, not caused by greenhouse gases, but by volcanic eruptions, changed weather patterns in the world, resulting in persistent droughts that caused famines and political unrest in ancient Egypt. The pharaohs of the Ptolemaic dynasty, such as Cleopatra, went to great lengths to adapt, transferring grain from productive regions to drought-plagued areas, opening up grain stores, crossbreeding cattle to develop heat-resistant animals, and providing tax relief. These foresighted efforts by the pharaohs managed to prolong the Egyptian empire for a half a century more. But ultimately, one of the greatest empires that the world has ever seen collapsed because of the effects of climate change. The difference between then and now is that we are the cause of today's climate change, and we have the means to stop it by changing our economy. So what could the economy of the future look like? We have a choice. It could be one based on familiar technologies, markets, and institutions. We could continue with polluted air and water, where our children suffer from respiratory diseases and 8 to 10 million people die each year from air pollution, where our economies are struck by frequent shocks caused by unpredictable weather changes, which cause catastrophic losses, where people have to move across borders as their livelihoods are destroyed by rising sea levels, persistent droughts, and rising temperatures, and one where the natural world continues to diminish. I can also paint a very different picture of the economy of the future, one in which we make the needed investments and create cities in which we can move and live and breathe and thrive, one in which the food we eat regenerates the earth rather than depletes it, where our economies continue to grow, and especially in poor countries, livelihoods and living standards continue to improve, but where this growth is greener, more stable, and where human well-being is enhanced by supporting and protecting nature and the ecosystems on which all life depends. Just as we had an industrial revolution that transformed our economies in the 19th century, and a green revolution which transformed agriculture in the 20th century, we need a green industrial revolution in the 21st centuries that makes our economies more sustainable. That low-carbon economy is one where there are huge opportunities for innovation and new technologies and a more attractive way of life. So how do we get this economy of the future? We know it will take a great deal of investment. Meeting the climate goals of the Paris Agreement requires investment on the scale of about $4 to $6 trillion per year globally. We know we are in difficult economic times with war, recession, and inflation. Where will the money come from for this new investment? In tough times, we need to use our limited resources most efficiently. And given the history of climate change, we need an appropriate balance between responsibility and resources. And as we learned during the COVID pandemic, when we try and tackle global problems from national silos, it is more expensive and less effective. So we need to do this together. Public sector investment will play a key role in many parts, particularly in the advanced economies. Despite current fiscal constraints, these investments can be financed because they will generate positive returns. For developing countries, many of which face high debt burdens and a high cost of capital, we need to enable the multilateral development banks to massively increase concessional finance to make clean investment cheaper than dirty ones. The actions needed are laid out very clearly in the report of the independent high-level expert group on climate finance, chaired by Vera Songway and Nick Stern, that will be launched this week. Lending by the multilateral development banks needs to increase at least threefold, supported by more capital and more imaginative ways of using their balance sheets, as has been recently suggested in a report to the G20. This lending needs to be supported so that the big emitters are compensated for incurring costs for producing global public goods, and so that adaptation funding is provided on generous terms for vulnerable countries where loss and damage is high. Such an approach would accelerate the green industrial and agricultural revolution using the most efficient financing channels we have for the world as a whole. And of course, the private sector has an important role to play. Governments can de-risk the regulatory environment by providing clear policy frameworks and guarantees. Development banks can provide platforms that crowd in private finance, creating leverage or sharing risks around first losses and frontier projects. And all sources of financing need to play their part at this moment to stretch beyond their comfort zones if we're going to make progress at the scale and speed that we need. I applaud the Egyptian government's focus on adaptation and Africa at this COP. Africa is responsible for only 1% of the stock of global emissions, but will be hardest hit by climate change. That cannot be right. At the same time, many African countries are rich in sunshine, wind, rivers, and forests. With support at a lower cost of capital, they could leapfrog the dirty energy systems of the past. And if we create a better carbon market, that could provide a huge source of income for countries rich in carbon sinks. The green industrial revolution could be the new growth story for Africa. So, the economy of the future is our choice. We face a classic intertemporal investment problem. Incur some investment costs now with high returns later, or opt for inaction or not enough action, but incur very high costs and risks later. Even if you don't take into account future generations, which make these arguments much, much stronger, it seems to me that the choice is clear. Climate change and biodiversity loss are here, and we are already suffering the consequences, as the film we just saw showed so clearly. Unlike the pharaohs, we can overcome this climate change by choosing a different economy for the future. Thank you very much.